Let's go ahead and get started. I'll end the poll here. So hello everyone and happy Earth Day. Welcome to Generation180's and EVNoire's co-hosted event, Ask an EV Owner. If you're here to learn from a great group of EV owners about their experience driving electric, then you're in the right place. My name is Stuart Gardner, and tonight I'm joined by Shelley Francis of EVNoire. A special thank you.
Sorry.
A special thank you to our team members working behind the scenes to help support this event. Before we get started, Shelley and I are each going to tell you a little bit about our organizations. Next slide. Generation180 is a national nonprofit organization based in Charlottesville, Virginia. We work to inspire and equip individuals to take action on clean energy. Next slide. Here's a quick look at our three major focus areas of work. We're working to flip the energy script, helping us move from a narrative focused on climate doom and gloom to a story focused on where we need to go, a world powered by 100% clean energy. A story that says we can do this and we all have a role to play. We focus on individuals in their homes and their communities because your energy matters. Certain behaviors and technologies not only help fight climate change, but they also help build the social momentum and political will we need to get big system level changes. We lead with two major nationwide campaigns, Solar for All Schools and Electrify Your Ride, which works to make electric vehicles more accessible. Solar and EVs are clean energy solutions proven to address two of the largest sources of carbon dioxide, emissions from electricity generation and transportation. Shelley, do you want to tell us a little bit about EVNoire?
I sure can, Stuart. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So EVNoire is all about EV best practices, so e-mobility best practices, as well as e-mobility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so part of our work really focus in on changing the paradigm of what an EV driver looks like. So conversations like this are like right up our alley and in our interests. Now, EV Hybrid Noir is the nation's largest network of diverse EV drivers and enthusiasts. And so we have members representing all over the country, as well as abroad, Canada, Europe, and Africa. So tonight you're going to hear from two of our esteemed members about their experiences, along with Bruce Merkin. So we're really looking forward to this conversation. So I think you'll get a chance to see just a couple highlights of our slides that just tell you a little bit about like where our chapters are located and where our members are located.
Awesome, thanks, Shelley.
You're welcome.
Just a few quick things before we dive in. Because of the number of people joining us tonight, attendees will remain on mute. So please use the Q&A to submit your questions. We'll get to as many of them as we can over the next hour. So let's get started. We have an awesome group of panelists tonight. Maybe we have you guys start and introduce yourselves. Tell us, you know, your name, what kind of car you drive, where you're from, and how long you've been driving the EV. Emily, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good afternoon or good evening, wherever you're located. My name is Emily Johnson. I live in Richmond, Virginia, and I drive a Tesla Model 3 2019 long range. And I have had my Model 3, it'll be 2 years next month. We'll be celebrating a birthday next month.
Awesome. Drew, how about you?
I also have a Tesla Model 3 long range. I'm out here in sunny Southern California. I know I've had mine, my birthday on mine 3 years won't be till about September, but it's definitely been a journey so far with it, yes.
Awesome. And Bruce, how about you?
Hi, I'm Bruce Merkin. I live in San Francisco, where it is cool and foggy today. And I drive a 2020 Hyundai Kona electric that I've owned since March of 2020. I managed to buy my car about a week before California went on COVID lockdown, because my timing is always perfect. And I just want to say, by day, I work for the Green Lining Institute, which is a public policy organization that, among other things, works on access to clean transportation. And that's what got me interested in being an EV owner.
That's great. Thanks, Bruce. Let's kick it off. Would love to hear from each of you about any initial concerns you had when you first went electric. And since driving an EV, have those concerns been addressed? Emily, do you want to start?
Sure. So I'll actually start by saying my desire to become an EV owner happened very, very quickly. Little backstory, I'm a salsa dancer, and my salsa instructor is an avid EV enthusiast. He drives a Nissan Leaf, and all the time we hear about the benefits of driving an EV. And I'll be honest, I was not very attracted to his car, so I never really looked into it. But one day we were in Baltimore for a salsa event, and we were walking back from a market, and he pointed a Model 3 out. He said, "Oh, that's the new Tesla Model 3." And I looked at it and I was like, that's all electric? And he's like, "Yeah, that's completely electric, no gas." And I was like, okay, well, that's not ugly. So I went back and I started researching researching the Tesla Model 3s. And this was on a Saturday. And that Tuesday, I test drove one and purchased it. And within a couple of weeks, it was there. But I will say that during those 3 days of avid researching, I was very concerned about range. I drive a lot. I work within Richmond, but I like to get up and go. If I want to go 2 hours up to DC, I want to be able to go. If I want to head 2 hours out east to Virginia Beach, I want to go. And so I was really worried about it. But I soon realized, as soon as I got my car, Tesla makes it, and this is probably the same for many other EV cars, but it makes it so easy. You get in your car, just like any navigation, you tell it where you want to go, and it's going to tell you how much battery you currently have and what you'll have when you get there. And if it feels that you need to charge, it tells you where you should stop and charge and how long you should charge for. And so, it's been almost 2 years for me. And that, that concern went out the window within the first couple of months that I had it.
That's great. Drew, how about you? Any initial concerns when you went electric?
Well, I know initially part of what my desire was to go electric was when gas was kind of really getting high. And, once you started, because California gas is a little more expensive than a lot of other places in the country. So once gas was getting past $4, my initial thought was to go with a hybrid. So I had actually initially done some research on getting like a hybrid Focus or a hybrid Avalon just to kind of save on the gas. And then, like a lot of people, once I saw that they were announcing kind of a cheaper Tesla, that's what kind of sold me. So I was one of those people that did the ever famous 2016, put a down payment down to kind of wait for this car. But I hadn't had any experience going electric. All I knew was my brother-in-law's an electrician, so I'm gonna be able to get it hooked up as far as the house goes. And once I got it, you kind of don't realize how much you hate stopping for gas. Because I've always been that guy I'll go in the morning. And then the minute the morning comes, I have to be at work at 7:30. I'm leaving the house at 7:15, and it still takes me 30 minutes to get there. If I stop for gas, I'm going to be late. So my e-light was notoriously on all the time. So I know that in the last 3 years of now being all electric with the car, it's just been like it's such a relief to go to sleep. Even if you're crawling in the house with 1 mile left, you wake up and you got 250 miles and you're good to go. So I think that's probably one of the most amazing parts of the journey so far for me, is just not having to stop at the gas station anymore.
That's awesome.
Great.
Bruce?
Yeah. Let's hear from you,
Go ahead,
Bruce.
Shelley.
No, that's fine. Bruce, let's hear from you. What's your story? How did you, come get engaged with electric vehicles?
Sure. Well, in my case, it certainly helped having colleagues who were knowledgeable about EVs, who had worked on issues of EV access for low-income communities and communities of color. So I could ask people questions. I did have a bit of a concern about range. I don't drive all that much, but I do have a brother who lives in the Sierra foothills, about 165 miles away, and at about 3,000 foot elevation.
Mhm.
So I wanted to be sure I could get there without too much hassle and hopefully get back. But you know, as Drew said, once you have an EV, you realize that you have the ability to do something which no gasoline-powered car can ever do, which is fill up your tank, so to speak, while you're asleep. And so, because I don't drive a huge amount, I almost exclusively charge at home. And we'll probably get into this later, but I find that it saves me a whole lot of money. And the other thing I wanted to highlight that other folks haven't said yet is it's just a better experience. When you drive electric, you start to realize that internal combustion engines are the cutting edge technology of 1910. And EVs are quieter, they're smoother, they are faster to off the line. It's just better. And I suspect I speak for everybody here when I say I'll never own a gasoline-powered car again. I'll never even think about it.
And Bruce, thank you for that feedback. I think you've already busted some of the myths that people have about EV ownership and what it's like to drive an EV. People think like they're slow, they're golf carts. They worry about that range anxiety in terms of like, will I be able to do this road trip? Will I be? And you said you can drive your particular vehicle and make that trip to visit your brother that's 150 plus miles away. So that's like really encouraging news to hear. In terms of just, you know, you talked about, or all of you talked about really what led you to this journey. Did you get a lot of pushback or opposition from friends and family when you told them like, I'm getting ready to get this electric vehicle, and folks are probably eyes were popping out of their head like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? You're crazy. You know, can you share a little bit about what that experience has been?
Well, I know
Everybody has had an experience. So I guess.
Oh yeah, well Emily, go right ahead.
Yes, we'll start with Emily.
Okay. So a lot of opposition. So friends, coworkers questioned a lot about the range and how would I charge my car? What if I got stuck? What about the battery? What if the battery died? It costs more to buy a new battery than to replace the car. Just all kinds of myths out there. There's questions about maintenance and what happens if something breaks on your car. And I think that was the biggest one. Like, well, since your car isn't something that, you know, there's not a lot of places that I can go to get my car fixed if something breaks. But, you know, 2 years into having this car, I have never had to have any maintenance on the car. I've never needed an oil change, never needed a tune-up. There's no engine. The only thing that I've done in 2 years is rotate my tires. And so, you know, looking back in hindsight, I can really go back and tell my friends that the car has been amazing. I feel extremely safe in the car. You know, I feel safe driving my kids in the car, and it really just, you know, all the kind of myths that were out there came up, and I was able to address those based on what I'd researched before buying the car. But haven't had any issues with my battery. Matter of fact, my car comes with a 8-year, 120,000 mile warranty on my battery. So I feel pretty good about that as well. So those are kind of the ones that I heard the most.
That's excellent, Emily. Thank you for sharing that. That is a perspective that I hear commonly. And what's really cool is that, and I will pivot, you know, to let Bruce and Drew jump in to share their experience too. But one of the things with all electric vehicles, some of the bonuses is that low to no maintenance. So you're not worrying about oil changes, you're not worrying about O2 sensors or changing brakes, you're not worrying about gas in the same way that you worry about charging your car at home or out, you know, while you're running around doing errands. So it's really a different thought process or different paradigm shift in transportation and mobility. So Bruce and Drew, what do you think? You know, what kind of opposition or feedback or, you know, comments did you get from friends and family members or coworkers when you started talking about, yeah, I think I'm going to dip my toe in this electric transportation world?
So actually, what I got from family was excuses why they hadn't gone electric already. I have, though, had a couple of conversations with sort of random strangers at parking lots and things, people who like wondered if it was kind of weak and slow or how far you could go, stuff like that. So I've had a little bit of myth busting to do. I did want to underline what Emily said about maintenance. Just to be sure, I looked in my owner's manual last week just to see what I needed to do. And the maintenance schedule was basically, check for washer fluid, rotate the tires every year or so. And it's so nice not having to worry about spark plugs and valves and oil changes and all that stuff, which is hassle and it adds up in terms of cost.
Absolutely.
And I know, kind of also to piggyback on that, the irony about the whole no maintenance thing is my car that I had before I got the electric car was a 2014 Nissan Altima. I name it Ashy Gray because the paint is just, that's neither here nor there. But with that, I went to get the car registered and it didn't pass smog. So when you've now been driving this electric car for 2 years and you have to now get the registration for the gas car, it's like, it won't get smog. It's like, well, I go online. Well, what could possibly be why it's not getting smog? Literally 7 different things that an electric car doesn't have, which could be the reason why it doesn't pass smog. Then there's another car that needed to get an oil change and it was $60 for the oil change. So what's funny is I'm getting annoyed and upset about what my gas cars need to get fixed. And I just wish that they were all electric cars because it's more of a hassle and an annoyance for those little things that you realize, regardless of what electric car you get. Again, you get a Kona, you get a Tesla, you get a Bolt. None of them require any of those things. Like when you get the registration paper, there is no get your emissions checked. And, even regardless of what state you're in, where those rules and regulations are different, it doesn't matter because once you go electric, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. And I think that's the biggest part with my family. I tried to convince them. And I think because I was waiting 2 years to go electric, I did so much research in the meantime, nobody really believed that I was going to get the car. Because they're like, who waits 2 years to get a car? That's stupid, you're slow. What are you talking about? But when I finally got it, I actually was able to get 3 other people to get one once they saw the benefits, once they drove it, and they've all loved it as well.
That's awesome. Emily, you touched on it, and a question we often hear, have any of you all ever run out of charge while driving from place to place, because that's what people often say, like, well, what if you run out of charge? And, so has that happened to any of you all?
For me, no. So I have gotten close. And when I say close, I say within 10 miles left of what it tells me I have left in my car. So in my 2 years, I have never run out of battery. I've heard rumors, and Drew can probably tell you stories as well. But I've heard rumors that even when you get down to 1 mile or 0 miles, it'll still let you go a little bit further. Maybe kind of like when the gas tells you you only have 1 or 0 miles left. I personally haven't. Again, the cars do a great job of telling you exactly how many miles you have left and how fast you should go to reach your destination. So for example, if I'm pretty low and I've said I need to go 60 miles and I only have 65 miles of battery in my car, it will tell me do not exceed 50 miles per hour in order to reach your destination based on the hill or the hills or the temperature. It kind of calculates all that for you and tells you how fast you should get there. But I think maybe some other people have some experiences to share in that.
Drew, Bruce, ever run out of charge?
I do have a story real quick. Quick version of the story. So I was coming home Los Angeles. I live about 65 miles from Los Angeles. It was raining. I didn't want to stop because I didn't want to obviously charge the car in the rain. So I'm 60 miles from the house. I've got 65 miles of rain, similar to what Emily said. Me not realizing though that when you're driving in the rain, obviously you're not going to go as smooth because you're getting pulled back because there's water. Let's just say I ran out of range. I hit 0, but most electric cars, what they don't tell you is they actually have like a backup. So I went on 0 for 8 miles, driving 22 miles an hour in like a hurricane to get to the charger. I did make it to the charger. I was very happy that the car had that, but the car did scream to me, go slower, go slower, go slower. So there was a whole lot of prayer going on, a whole lot of, please, Papa Elon, get me there. But yes, I can verify that if you do run out of range, as long as you go really slow, you could probably scrape between another 5 to 10 miles to get where you're going.
They give you a little extra there.
Give you a little extra.
I will say I am not the kind to ever cut it that close. The only time in my life I've ever come close to being stranded was actually about 20 years ago in a gasoline-powered car driving across Wyoming, not calculating the fact that on some of those rural interstates, you can go a really long time without seeing a gas station. And I pulled into the town of Casper almost literally on fumes. So I've been overcautious ever since. I have never come close to running out on my EV. I will say though that what I think is probably worth doing is if you're going to go on a road trip, particularly in unfamiliar places, or if you're going out in rural areas where charging stations may not be all that frequent, there's a great app called PlugShare, which you can look at. You can use either on your phone or on your computer. It's a map-based interface where you can look at where you're going, and you can see where all the charging options are, and you can plan ahead. And I've done that on several trips. I don't like to sort of wing it and let the car tell me when I'm getting close. I'm not that trusting. So I'd like to have my options figured out. And in most places you can do that, and it's just not a big problem as long as you take 2 minutes to plan ahead.
That's so interesting because and I know that's probably a common question that you hear. And do you have to think about like how often do you actually run out of gas with your ICE vehicle? Like, does that happen to you frequently? And if so, that's a different webinar that we need to have to address that particular issue. But just in thinking about like how you had to make this shift in terms of going from an ICE vehicle to all electric vehicle. Can you talk about like how you had to approach driving now as an EV driver? Have you found that transition to be difficult or overburdensome in terms of just thinking about like charging your route, driving and road tripping? Just kind of how can you speak to, what's it like to make that mental shift from driving an ICE vehicle to driving an electric vehicle? And I can start with you, Bruce.
I will say it hasn't been much of a shift at all. Mm-hmm. For the first week or so, it was a little unfamiliar just because it's a little bit different. But once I got used to it, things have hardly changed at all. Partly it's I don't drive a lot of long distances. I don't usually have to worry about stopping to charge. But I got used to it really quickly. And again, to me, it's just a better experience. The pickup when you hit the accelerator is instant. It's dead silent. If you're going kind of slow and not getting a lot of road noise, you can imagine you're in a Rolls Royce. Even though I'm in a relatively inexpensive Hyundai, which does not normally compete with Rolls Royce. So I would say, there'll be a little bit of a learning curve when you get used to things like regenerative braking. It has a slightly different feel. But I was kind of amazed how fast I got used to it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Bruce. What about you, Drew or Emily? What has your experience been in terms of just thinking about, driving differently now that you have the EV?
I think for me, the funny part when you talk to people about range is all of a sudden everyone feels like they're going to drive across the country. Like most people, they don't go anywhere. Like again, Bruce has said he doesn't really drive that far. Most people swear that they're like, well, what if I want to go from California to New York? And like, sir, when was the last time you drove across? Well, never. I would just hop on a plane. Exactly. So honestly, I found myself actually road tripping more with the electric vehicle just because it's more cost effective to travel that way. And a lot of the tech advances has made it easier for the drive. But in all honesty, most people for long trips are still going to just hop on a plane. So most people aren't going to drive more than 250 miles in a day, and that's still 125 miles each way. So the misconception is that 200 miles isn't enough or 250 miles isn't enough, when the reality is, even if you drove 250 miles in that day, once you come home and you fall asleep, you charge the car, you wake up, and you've got that 250 miles, and you can do it all over again.
Excellent. That really, really good point is, Drew. Like, there's nothing like having your own fueling station in your garage, or if you don't have a garage, maybe it's close to you at your nearest grocery store or someplace in your community. But Emily, what about you? Like, what has the process, making that shift been like for you?
It was actually much more simple than I envisioned in my head, because again, I worried about range. I worried about what if I'm going somewhere and I have to charge my car. But what I've noticed is, if you drive even if I had to drive 100 miles a day, if I work 50 miles outside of where I live and I had to drive 100 miles a day, if you have a charger at home, you still would never really see an impact if you've got, a decent sized battery. And so, even charging stations, I rarely ever use them unless I'm traveling. So, and when I do have to use them, you'll notice that charging stations are very strategically placed. You're not going to find one, in a back alley off the side of the road somewhere. They're usually they've got a lot in Wawa or Sheetz parking lots, if you're from the East Coast and know what that means. A lot of malls or strip malls, there's often places where there's a lot of restaurants. So, every charging station that I've been to has been in an area where you can walk somewhere if you need to use the restroom or if you want to grab a bite to eat. But if you think about range, so mine, for example, is 300 miles. That means I can drive several hours before I even really need to stop. And if I'm going on a road trip where I need to go more than several hours, I'm going to want to stop and charge my car anyway. So it has really kind of worked out for me and helped me plan more accordingly. Like, okay, I need to stop and stretch my legs. And sometimes, my car will tell me I only need to charge for 15 minutes in order to get to my destination with a decent amount of battery left. So it's a matter of running a gas station, which feels weird, and I'll grab some snacks and I'll get back in my car and I'm good.
That's awesome. We've getting a lot of good questions in the Q&A, and a common one we see when we're talking about range is about winter and cold weather. Have you guys experienced kind of negative effects based on cold temperatures? Is that just a myth that actually doesn't really affect you? Any personal experience regarding cold weather and driving your electric vehicle?
So I can say I haven't had any bad experiences. I've driven my car in the snow and it handled it really well. And I think it's just because it sits so low to the ground. It's all-wheel drive, and the weight distribution because of the battery is really good. But what I will say is I left my car at the airport for a week during the winter, not realizing that cold weather can degrade your battery a little bit more quickly. So of course I have an app on my phone where I can see my car and see how many miles are on there. But there was a panic moment where I was a little frantic because I could see that the mileage was decreasing faster. And when I say faster, I mean it was maybe about a mile every couple of hours when it was cold versus a mile every 5 to 10 hours when it was just idle in normal weather. But I did, I just got an update on my car a couple weeks ago, and it said it was to help improve battery, sustaining the battery during cold weather. So it may be a little bit different this winter with my battery. So we'll see. And I think that the technology for those batteries is getting smarter and smarter to keep those with more range during the winter.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Emily. So we have some questions in the chat, numerous questions actually around charging and charging infrastructure. So both we probably need to speak to what it's like to charge away from home, particularly if you don't have access to home charging. And then for those of you who do have charging at home, do you charge on a 110 line or do you charge on a 220 or something else? So who would like to start?
I can start off.
Okay.
I did have it's a NEMA 1450, if I'm saying it correctly. It's like your dryer plug. I did have one installed in my garage. I bought the part from Lowe's for $8. I knew an electrician, and we traded favors. I had a motorcycle. I sold it to him for cheap. So he installed the plug for me for free. So it cost me $8 to get a plug installed in my garage. And of course, my car comes with a cable. So I already had that. But as far as I do know people who live in apartments or live places and they have EVs where they can't charge at home. And just in the 2 years that I have had my car, the number of charging stations, and I'm not just talking about Tesla. I know somebody was asking about where do I find them, and Shelly mentioned the PlugShare app, which is great. If you go on that app, you can look and you'll see they're all over the place, and it'll tell you, okay, this one will charge as a fast charger. This one's a little bit slower. This one will work with your car. This one won't. So I think there's apps and there's technology out there that make it really simple for you to find places to charge. But a lot of places now are adding charging stations. And Shelly actually knows about a network working with the local power company to help get companies, organizations to have chargers installed in their parking lot at no cost.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me just add to that one thing that's increasingly being seen is hotels and motels offering charging as an amenity for their guests. So, and you can use an app like PlugShare to locate those. So if you're going to take a road trip, you can arrange to stay somewhere where you can plug in your car overnight or while you're having dinner or whatever, and not have to worry about it. I am really low tech in part because I'm cheap. I charge my car at home just in a plain old regular wall socket with a little level 1 charger that comes with the car. And that suits my needs perfectly fine. It's slow. It's definitely not as slow as what's called a level 2, not as fast as what's called a level 2 charger. But overnight, in 12 or 13 hours, I can get about 60 miles worth of range. And that's all I usually need. And I don't let my battery level get too low. So I've never felt a need to spend a lot of money on an expensive charger.
Thank you, Bruce. And I'll even add, I can echo that sentiment. Like when I first got my Leaf, I charged on a 110 outlet for a full year before I made the move to get the level 2 charge. And part of it was like, I'm getting used to the car. I was debating like, okay, do I need this? Or is this like a want or a need? And then I figured out, I learned the car and I was like, you know what? If I want to be able to do multiple errands on the weekend or on the evening, like let me get the fast charger or the level 2 charger, and that way I can kind of do a lot more in terms of my driving. What about you, Drew? What's your experience been like with charging? And, did you start off with the 110 outlet? Are you charging a lot away from home? Did you have any barriers to charging?
I know for the most part, kind of like everyone else, I do the bulk of my charging at home. So it's very rare that I need to charge away from the house. I know that I've been because I make more road trips now, usually Los Angeles and San Diego have been like spots that I've been finding myself frequenting And it's kind of now I know the one charger that I need to hit. So usually I can make it down there, and then I know coming back, estimate time frame where I have to charge to come back and then stop. Another benefit though, kind of to piggyback on what the other panelists were saying, is a lot of places will put the EV chargers up front when you go somewhere. So say if you go to theme parks, if you go to colleges, if you go to arenas and stadiums, you can actually get better parking if you drive an electric vehicle. Because when you pull in, you say, hey, I need to charge my vehicle right up front, sir. So I actually had a friend of mine that just went to Universal Studios out here, and literally they parked right by the elevator in the front, which they usually would have charged an extra $25 because of premium parking. But by having an electric vehicle, they got access to that absolutely free. So that's something to keep in mind if you go places. Ask where the electric charges are, and they'll point you to the front.
That's genius. People should advertise that more often as a benefit.
It's our secret.
That's awesome.
Membership
What
has privileges.
Yeah, exactly. Another question from the audience. You know, were there a couple deciding factors, primary deciding factors in choosing your vehicle? You know, what was it that made you choose yours? People often look for advice like, how did you decide which one? Can you tell us a little bit about that? Drew, you want to start?
So for me, I had wanted a Tesla since I first saw one in like 2014. And I didn't know what it was. I said, what is that? I have no idea what that car is. I knew I couldn't afford it also. I said, I don't know what it is. I know I can't afford it, but I want it. So after waiting 2 years and then hearing they were going to announce the Model 3, I got really excited because I not only wanted an electric car, but I wanted a car with the tech to drive itself. Those were the two biggest factors. Like, it's electric, it looks nice, and it can drive itself. So I know for Tesla and having a car that's been able to do that, I would never buy a car that can't drive itself now, like electric and drive itself. Because I took a road trip last summer, and I literally drove from California to Atlanta, up north.
Wow.
Back to, yes, it was about a week.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was about a week, but the car did 95% of the driving for me. And
wow.
And when I say that, I mean, people would call me like, what are you doing? I'm sitting here. Well, aren't you tired? Nah, I'm literally sitting here. And it was, I mean, you have to obviously pay attention. Kind of like Bruce said, you don't quite know where some charging places would be. So say if it would tell you, you have 200 miles to your destination, you want to charge to 250 just in case. Like, you can trust the car, but you don't want to trust it too much. But yeah, so now every time I have a long trip, I make way more 2-hour drives places simply because I just sit there and the car does the work. So that was the selling factor for me. And yeah, my next car, regardless on what company comes out with a car, because so many brands are coming out with so many amazing cars, it's got to be able to drive itself. That's my only, yeah.
Emily, how about you? Was there one or two things in particular where like that helped you choose your particular electric vehicle?
Yeah, so I work in IT. So the technology on the Tesla sold me probably the most, but I think a close runner-up would be once I started researching the safety features of the car. And I was reading that it had 5-star safety ratings and was higher than really any other gas car that was out there on the market right now. And so for me, I think that just knowing that this car was extremely safe, and it's a nice looking car. So I really like the way that it looked in general, but I think the safety features and just the technology, and knowing that my car is like an iPhone or a cell phone, where every 4 to 6 weeks I'm getting an update, and it's kind of like getting a new car, because you've got, like I just mentioned a little while ago, I got a new feature that said, oh, hey, by the way, we've noticed that there's something that we can push an over-the-air update to your car, and now all of a sudden your car drives faster, accelerates faster, or holds the battery longer when it's cold outside. So I think the over-the-air updates and the safety features were what sold me the most.
Yeah, that type of thing is amazing, that technology. Bruce, similar or something completely different?
So I'm kind of the opposite of the other two. I knew I didn't want a Tesla. I'm not a fan of the company. I won't go into a lot of details. So I shopped around. I looked at and drove a number of the other EVs that are on the market, and I just instantly knew the Kona was it. It's really agile. It's really fun to drive. The interior is really nice. The seats are the best seats in any car that I've ever owned. Even the base model has all sorts of safety technology, you know, the blind spot warning and the rear backup warning and stuff. It's just a really well put together little package. I will say on the downside, it has the worst owner's manual of any car I've ever owned. It's weirdly organized and sometimes seems barely translated from the Korean, but I totally love the car.
That's great. Yeah, and I think you guys alluded to it a little bit in some cases about you know, fitting your lifestyle. And I think in the next couple of years, you're going to see more and more different types of electric vehicles in SUVs and pickups even. So there'll be many more options, you know, beyond what's available today.
That's a great segue, Stuart, because I was thinking that, you know, just about what you were saying, and, you know, how do we get more people into electric vehicles? Like, how do we get our friends and neighbors, folks who live in rural communities, folks who maybe just be disproportionately impacted by air pollution, and how do we get them to make this transition? Like, what are some of the things that you think will be helpful, thinking about the experiences that led you to, you know, pulling, well, I don't want to say that, but what that led you to led you to jumping in an electric vehicle?
I'll just jump in and say, take them for a drive in your car.
Mm-hmm.
I did that with my niece and her husband, and they went out and bought a Kona themselves the next month.
Oh, wow.
In part, that was precipitated by their gasoline-powered car having an unfortunate accident, and they needed to replace it. But as soon as they experienced my car, was like, this is great, I need to have one.
Excellent. So it sounds like that the messenger being a friend and a peer and getting that trusted messenger's perspective made them be ready to make that leap. What about you, Emily and Drew? Like, what are your thoughts on this?
So I think Bruce touched on a good point. The car EVs, I think they really sell themselves. So if you think about it, you really don't see any marketing for a lot of the EVs. You'll see some of the newer coming soon ones out there, but Tesla doesn't. You don't see a commercial out there for Tesla. So I think, you know, just being open whenever someone comes up to me and says, hey, can I ask you about your car at a stoplight? I get it all the time. You know, people asking me questions about my car. I love to talk about it. I could talk about it all day. I see where we're running out of time, so I'll keep it short. But I think just you know, once you have an EV, share the benefits of it. You know, utilize your social media to share you know, the benefits of it, and people are going to ask questions, and just be open to answering those questions. But I think Bruce kind of hit it on the money. It's, you know, take them for a ride and let them see and experience what it's like, and I feel like they would definitely fall in love with it.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like, having the opportunity to like really see, feel, and experience the exhilaration and being pinned back in the seat is like an experience like no other. But what about you, Drew? What do you think we can do to get more people excited and get more people into electric vehicles?
I mean, a lot of it is the getting them under the understanding. For one, you can sell them on the tax credit that for a lot of companies still exists. That's a big perk. Also, a lot of states have different funds that you get back. So in some states, you literally can save like $11,000 on getting an EV, which most people have no idea. Also, getting people under the understanding that say, for example, people don't know a Kona exists because it just came out and there isn't a commercial, or people think every single Tesla costs $100,000 because they don't advertise that they're cheaper. So people will go out, for example, before the Model Y came out, I had my sister and 2 friends. They all were women. They all were women that wanted a compact SUV. And there was nothing on the market that they wanted at the time. That's simply what it was. They wanted an EV, but they said a Model 3 is too small. I don't want to drive a sedan. I want a hatchback and I want to sit higher off the ground. The option didn't exist. Now you see that all the EV companies, though, that's the market that they're dropping, and that's what people want. So I think as we let people know that, hey, that actually exists now. You can get something that sits high. You can get a Kona. You can get a Model Y. You can get the new Toyota. You can get the Lyriq that's going to come out. Like, so many EVs are going to come out. We shouldn't wait for the commercial to sell it to people, even if they don't want the EV that we have. I think because all EVs give you the torque, whether you take a test drive in a Kona or a Tesla, you're going to get the same experience from any EV. And once you sell people on that, I think, yeah, again, like everyone else has said, that'll kind of sell itself.
That's awesome. It sounds like the in-car experience is the best source of information for someone considering an EV. Do you all agree with that? Like, if someone, one of the questions is, hey, I'm thinking about getting an EV, what's the best source of information? What do you recommend, or what did you use when you were shopping for an EV? Is it your friend and neighbor who happens to be driving one?
Well, I honestly tell people, I say to them, don't test drive a Tesla unless you're ready to sell your firstborn and get one, because I remember test driving a Model S, and for one, you look at your old car, regardless on what it is, even if it's a luxury car, because it doesn't drive like an electric vehicle. So you look at that and you say to yourself, what am I doing with my life? I need to get something electric because that torque is so fun. So I think test drives are ideal. I think right now, I think like the Polestar is offering, you can actually go online and they'll come to your house and give you a test drive of the car. And if you go to a lot of dealerships, a lot of people aren't really as knowledgeable about the electric cars that they have at the dealership itself. So if you do have a friend that tells you, yeah, even if they aren't knowledgeable, go online, get a bit of information, take that test drive, and that is honestly the best source of information you can get.
What do you think, Emily? Is test drive, or you have another recommendation for the people in the audience about where to find out more information?
Yeah, I agree with Drew. I would say unless you're prepared to buy, don't test drive, because you will want to buy that day. I was prepared when I went. I just wanted to make sure. But what I did a lot of YouTube research videos. So I was able to just kind of look at what are EV sedans out there, what are the newest EVs, what's on the market, because you'll hear about a lot of EVs that aren't even really available for you to buy yet. But I can tell you there are so many YouTube channels and people who are really passionate about their EVs, and they will take you click by click throughout the screen on what's on their EV inside and out, to show you really everything you need to know, as well as make you feel like you're actually test driving in the car with them. So I'd say YouTube was really kind of my best avenue. There's also a whole lot of EV groups out there. So there's, Shelly, we've got one here. So there's EV groups out there that you can join on social media. And then check locally. So I know here in Richmond, we will have, there's like RVA Drive Electric events, and they will have events where people bring all types of EVs, and they'll just go and you can go and talk to everybody who drives EVs and get all kind of a feel and look. You can test drive EVs at those events as well. So I'd say check locally to see if there's any EV events that you could join.
I would just
Bruce?
double click on all of that. Don't have too much to add, but talk to people drive one, look for events. You can do online research like you can for any car you might purchase. And as there are more models coming out, it might be worth scanning online just to see what looks like it might fit your needs before you start driving.
I have a quick question. So do you all still drive ICE vehicles? Do you
I think
still own a
only,
vehicle?
only when you leave town and the EV's not available to rent, then you'll.
I've had bad experiences. So occasionally I'll have to rent a car for work, and it's like I'm trying to start the car. So in the Tesla, you push it down and it's in drive, or you push it up and it's in reverse. And I'll push it down, and the windshield wipers will come on, or the turn signal will come on. It takes a while to adjust. It just feels different. And then when you have to stop and get gas, I actually, the last time I rented a car, I had to Google online how to get the gas cap open. I couldn't figure it out. I was frustrated. And then when I put the gas in my car, it cost me $50, and I was even more frustrated. So it was a pretty traumatic experience. But so I don't. And I thought, and I'll tell you, I thought I would. So my car, I gave it to my daughter. When I bought my car, I gave my old car to my daughter. She needed one. And I was, saying, well, this is still my car, in case of emergencies, and never drove it again.
Wow. Wow. Do you find yourself sometimes when you are in ICE vehicles, leaving the vehicles running?
Yes.
Instead of turning it off?
So for those who don't drive an electric car, it's like a phone. When you're done with it, it just kind of goes into standby. There's no on-off power button. You get in the car, you put your foot on the brake and you tap it down and you go. So yes, I have gone into the grocery store and came back and the car was still running because I forgot to actually hit the off switch.
So if you have to tell, so some of the people on tonight are what we call BEV intenders or EV curious. And so what would you tell them, or what kind of feedback or tips or guidance would you give them in terms of like helping them kind of make that leap, make that jump into getting a new EV or even a used EV?
I would say just do it. Don't be afraid. It will be slightly different, but it will be better.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. What about Drew? Drew, what do you think? Like, what tip would you give them, or tips?
I would say take all of the misconceptions that, like, the reasons why you wouldn't, and then really do the research to make sure that that's the right reason why you wouldn't give it a shot. I think maybe people in apartments would be more leery because they wouldn't have the option to charge at home. But I think when you honestly realize how close other charges are and just the money saving, I think once you really think about never having to do an oil change, not having to do those small checks, not having to worry about your car getting too old to be on the road, those type of things, a lot of times you may see that EV ownership is a little more expensive at the start, but within 2 and 3 years, you're saving so much money. It's worth it if you're going to keep a car for at least 5 years.
It looks like
and I would agree with that. Sorry, Stuart. I was just going to say, I agree with everything they said. Just, do yourself a favor and Google what are the benefits of an electric vehicle. And I will say, for me personally, I never really had a desire to buy an electric vehicle until I started looking up the benefits of it. And what do people think after they purchased one? And I saw the reviews and I said, okay, I'll test drive it. I fell in love with it, bought it that day, and I would never buy another gas car. I'm totally sold.
That's amazing. That's amazing. We have time for one more question. While you guys answer, we'll launch a second poll just to see how compelling your stories have been this evening. And then also want to note, we'll put in the chat what we call the Going Electric Pledge. So pledging that your next car will be electric. So final question, answer. How important is it for EV owners to kind of share their stories like you all did tonight, to talk about how great EVs are and the benefits they bring and the joy of ownership? What's the EV owner's role in kind of convincing other people. Emily, do you want to start?
Sure. I think it's very important. As I mentioned earlier, you don't see a lot of marketing around electric vehicles. There's a big misconception about them that, you know, they're slow or they're unattractive or they're hard to maintain, or, you know, you have to be worried about how far you can drive. But it is everything that you hear about it is completely opposite. So I think it's really important for those of us who have EVs, are in this EV community, to help share the benefits, not only because they're just great cars, they're just amazing cars and it's an amazing experience to have. And if you care about your friends, you'll tell them about that and want them to have the same experience. But, you know, let's be realistic, it's the future. It's you know, there's rules and regulations that are making sure this is our future, and it's better for the environment. And how much better does it get than that?
That's awesome. That's awesome. Bruce, what's the role of the EV owner to kind of spread the word?
So I will mostly second what Emily said. I think right now there's definitely a big role for us to play in simply dispelling myths, talking about what it's like. But I'm going to stick my neck out here and make a prediction that in 2 or 3 years, that's not going to be necessary. I think we are very close to the tipping point where it will pretty generally be recognized that the internal combustion engine is yesterday's technology. It's going the way of the horse and buggy, and electric is the future. And I don't think we're there this year, but I think we're closer than most people realize.
Awesome. Drew?
This is really cool.
I will also co-sign what my constituents said. And to piggyback on that, I will say that one of the big perks is that now companies that aren't luxury companies are getting more into the space. So once your Toyotas and your Hondas, which are synonymous for having cars, that you can get your teenage son a Honda Civic and no, I don't have to worry about that. Or I can get someone a Nissan Altima, and I don't have to worry about that. So once companies that everyone knows and they trust the reliability in them start to come out, I think just like Bruce said, you won't really have to now be an advocate to tell someone why, you know, about a company that they haven't really heard of. Because I know with a lot of companies, we assume because we're in the EV space that people just know the information that we do. We assume you should know it's easy to charge. But the best way I think to look at it is when the first phones came out that had no physical keys, and everyone with a BlackBerry swore, oh my God, why are you going to get a phone with no keys? Now, if someone pulls out a phone with some keys, take a look at the looks that they'll get. Like, where'd you get that dinosaur? And that's going to be the same thing that's going to happen with electric cars probably in the next 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's so fitting that you shared that. So even like today is Earth Day, and you said, you know, EVs are the future, you know, the technology is here and people are slowly embracing it. And as you said, there are plethora of different types of EV options coming, like every week, every day, different manufacturers are saying that they're transitioning. Toyota is going to bring out 15 new models. Honda's getting ready to launch their electric vehicle. So just now, that's all you're going to be able to purchase is electric vehicles. And that could be that's a good thing. That's a good thing in our perspective. So we do want to say thank you guys to our panelists for you know, sharing their time with us this evening. And then thank you to you attendees for attending and sharing all those awesome questions. We hope that it sounds like from the poll, we've convinced a lot of folks. We also would ask that you just complete the post-webinar evaluation. Just click on it and give us your feedback so we can continue to improve our webinars and bring you the information that you need.
Thank you all. Appreciate everyone joining, and thanks so much for the panelists. You can find out more, check out EVNoire.com and Generation180.org, and we'll post this video on the YouTube channels. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great evening.
See you. Happy Earth Day.
Yep. Happy Earth Day.